You're listening to another episode of Mr. Allard's Neighborhood. This is the place where you're entitled to Brad's opinion. And now for your host, Brad Allard.
Well, we're back. What happened there, Taylor?
I don't know. The stream just went bloop.
You think it's Zuckerberg again?
Probably. They don't want you talking about this.
I guess not. Well, he's not even a Harvard graduate. He dropped out of school.
Go figure.
And see, think how good he could have done if he was a Harvard graduate.
Yep.
I say that with sarcasm. I hope you catch. Anyway, we're back. We had just a blip, so we're going to try this again. But anyway, like we were talking about in the first go-around, Taylor and I are both kind of grunting ourselves through the weather here. I don't know what I got. It's in the air. It's like a touch of bronchitis, whatever else. How are you feeling today?
I've never felt better.
Yeah. Okay, fine.
This honey citrus mint tea from Starbucks is a lifesaver.
Well, I'm not a big
tea fan.
Yeah, neither am I. So I'm hoping I may go by and try it. What the heck? I got $20. Yeah, I got $20. I got,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how much Starbucks. They put the bucks in Starbucks, that's for sure. But
no
anyway,
kidding.
We're going to talk about the rise of anti-Semitism in both our politics and in our academic institutions. And I'm sure most of y'all are familiar with what you saw last week with this disgraceful performance of the Ivy League presidents that were testifying before Congress. And we're going to comment on that. We're going to show a few clips on that. And I'm going to talk about my experience, which is nothing like what I saw. I didn't experience anything like that. I didn't see that experience at the universities I went to. So we're all talking about a select group. You're going to hear that often. We're going to be hacking through the show. Also, we're going to talk about some of the politics. The left wing of the Democrat Party apparently has fully embraced anti-Semitism and is causing problems for Joe. And I'm not, my opinion of Joe Biden, I think, is well stated over and over again. But on this one, I agree with him and how he's handling it for the most part. I do worry that he might start shimmying and shaking because of polls and whatever else. But to this point, he's been pretty supportive of Israel, and I'm glad for that. And we're going to just, in general, go over the events that's been going on in Israel, and also the complete and total hypocrisy of many of these left-wing groups. But I'll just get into all that after the ads. All right, we'll try these ads again. All right. So if you heard the first time, CrossFit Burleson gets a second plug here. CrossFit Burleson, 317 Southwest Wilshire. Check out their webpage, crossfitburleson.com, for plans, classes, training, trainers, all the above. It's a physical workout, and you need to have a place where you are under supervision and it's well monitored, so it's a safe environment. So CrossFit Burleson, also Shandy at Shandy Stogstill Group. She's still selling real estate. December, they say, is a pretty slow month, and it's kind of slow for her, but not. It's just that's what all the realtor friends I have say. In December, people are more focused on Christmas and whatever else, but she's still selling. She has a couple of closers this month, and so she's doing pretty well. And she knows where to find the houses here in Burleson if you're looking to move into this area. Also, of course, our friend Otto at our place. I neglected to mention this in the first take, but this coming Saturday, Stephen Carl Jansen, Burleson Santa, is going to be there, and he's collecting Christmas cards for the Aiken family. We all know what happened. Matt Aiken passed away about this time last month. And this is going to be the first Christmas without him for his small boys. And so Stephen is trying to collect as many Christmas cards as he can. So bring one. If you're going to go see him at our place, go see him there. Also, if you want to, you can't make it Saturday, but you want to get a card, just go by and give it to the ladies at the counter, and they'll put it aside, and Stephen will collect them then. But it's a great place to do it, and it's very, very typical that our place would do such a thing. They're very much community-oriented. And I'm very proud to have them as a sponsor, certainly, because they do a lot of good things, as does this gentleman here, Chris, and his partner, Nathan. They do a really good job at community support. All of them do. That's one of the good things about my sponsors I like so much, is that I can endorse them professionally and personally without an iota reservation. And I'm very pleased and honored that they choose to sponsor this show because of the kind of people they are. Anyway, Wild Cigar. This Saturday is their 2-year anniversary. They're going to have specials on cigars and drinks. They're going to have the ball games on. They're going to have one of their vendors there. And so it's a great place to go. You watch, we got the playoffs coming up pretty soon. We're going to have bowl games plenty pretty soon. So it's a good place to go do those kind of things. Also, thank you to Tiffany Nico over at local life. I saw her at the Gala's party at our place, good grief, Southern Gym. And they're doing well. She looked really good. She looked well, and she looked like her business has really been just steadily increasing. They have 30,000 homes every month. Had a lot of eyeballs look at that magazine at Gala's party while they're, just kind of browsing around. And it's a good place to advertise in this community. So I give it every thought if you really want to reach directly to the consumer. Also, Burleson Buzz, burlesonbuzz.com/Allard23 will get you a discount. And the thing about what really I think is a good reason to subscribe to this is this morning he put out a report on last night's city council meeting, and apparently there's some controversy in Old Town, and then I invite you to either read it from Burleson Buzz and or Burleson Political Facts on Facebook that Jackie Jones runs, and you'll get an idea what's going on. But it's going to be a discussion topic next Monday when I have Victoria on, so I'm sure we'll be talking about that quite a bit. All right, so like I said, most of y'all, I'm sure, are quite aware of what went on last week in the congressional hearings. What's been going on these college campuses is that you had protests against Israel's conduct towards Gaza in this war. And it's not just say we protest, they are also calling, in many cases, for the elimination of Israel itself, not just a modification of their behavior, but the elimination of it. That slogan you hear over and over is a code. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. That's not a call for coexistence. That's a call to eliminate the Jewish presence in the Middle East, period. It's been used by many of the jihadist groups, including Hamas, as their way of looking at the elimination of Israel. You look at the charter of Hamas. It was written in 2007. Well, actually, it was written in 1987, and then when they took over Gaza, they updated a little bit with minor modifications. It's clearly explicit. There is no room for Israel in the Middle East. They don't even mince words about it. There's no euphemism there. They basically said they call for the destruction of the Jewish race. And so many of these nitwit protesters on these college campuses here in the United States or in Britain are echoing those words, even if they don't know what they mean. And so what happens is Congress calls up the Ivy League presidents where this is going on, where the anti-Semitism against Jewish students is rising, that threats against Jewish students are rising. And the answers that those presidents gave made me sick. Let's just watch for ourselves.
Madam Chair, I'd like to yield the balance of my time to the gentlewoman from New York.
Dr. Kornbluth, yes. At MIT, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate MIT's code of conduct or rules regarding bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
If targeted at individuals, not making public statements.
Yes or no? Calling for the genocide of Jews does not constitute bullying and harassment?
I have not heard calling for the genocide for Jews on our campus.
But you've heard chants for intifada.
I've heard chants, which can be anti-Semitic depending on the context, when calling for the elimination of the Jewish people.
So those would not be according to the MIT's code of conduct or rules?
That would be investigated as harassment if pervasive and severe.
Ms. McGill, at Penn, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's rules or code of conduct? Yes or no?
If the speech turns into conduct, it can be harassment, yes.
I am asking specifically calling for the genocide of Jews. Does that constitute bullying or harassment?
If it is directed and severe or pervasive, it is harassment.
So the answer is yes.
It is a context-dependent decision, Congresswoman.
It's a context-dependent decision. That's your testimony today. Calling for the genocide of Jews is depending upon the context. That is not bullying or harassment. This is the easiest question to answer yes, Ms. McGill. So is your testimony that you will not answer yes?
If it if the
yes
speech
or
becomes
no?
if the speech becomes conduct, it can be harassment, yes.
Conduct meaning committing the act of genocide? The the speech is not harassment, this is unacceptable, Ms. McGill. I'm going to give you one more opportunity for the world to see your answer. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's code of conduct when it comes to bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
It can be harassment.
The answer is yes. And Dr. Gay, at Harvard, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
It can be, depending on the context.
What's the context?
Targeted as an individual, at an individual.
It's targeted at Jewish students, Jewish individuals. Do you understand your testimony is dehumanizing them? Do you understand that dehumanization is part of anti-Semitism? I will ask you one more time. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
Anti-Semitic rhetoric. When
And is it anti-Semitic rhetoric?
Anti-Semitic rhetoric, when it crosses into conduct that amounts to bullying, harassment, intimidation, that is actionable conduct, and we do take action.
So the answer is yes, that calling for the genocide of Jews violates Harvard Code of Conduct, correct?
Again, it depends on the context.
It does not depend on the context. The answer is yes, and this is why you should resign. These are unacceptable answers across the board.
I don't even know how to respond to that, tell you the truth. I mean, the congresswoman in the clip is Elise Stefanik of New York, and basically her point is correct. I mean, the idea that calling for the death or the genocide of a race of people or just one person individual, that's not protected free speech. But it is on Harvard's campus. It is on Penn's campus, MIT's campus, all the Ivy Leagues. And I'm going to talk about the Ivy Leagues in the second half of the show and basically how they're vastly overrated. But the point is that I'm watching this on the news. I'm astounded that these women that were representing these Ivy League schools are so obtuse and so afraid of their own students that they're going to let them say anything they want. I'd like to show you the Bill Maher clip. Taylor, you know who Bill Maher is?
Familiar with him, yes.
Well, he's on HBO, does a show called Real Time, and he really says what's on his mind, to put it that way, and he does drop a lot of F-bombs and whatever else, so I can't show the clip. But he said, he was asking his guest, in any other context, you take out the word Jews and put any other racial or ethnic group in there, would Harvard had still had these kind of answers? Okay? The idea that the Jews are an acceptable target for this kind of conduct at Ivy League schools when they are hyper sensitive to any slight towards any other fill-in-the-blank group you want to put in there, ethnic group, gender group, sexual orientation group, whatever else. I mean, think about it this way. If you had a group marching through Harvard saying, genocide against, like I said, fill in the blank, would that Dr. Gay's answer been any different? Which he said, well, only if they take action. So Stefanik's point is a correct one. So people are going to have to actually be killed for Harvard to step in. I just was amazed by that. If you want to see the Maher clip, it's on YouTube. But I like I said, because of his rather salty nature, you may have I couldn't show on the show. But anyway, the point is that he is correct. The Jews seem to be the only acceptable target for this kind of speech and conduct. It's the only group, it seems like, in our country where their synagogues could be attacked, their menorahs, since it's Hanukkah now, and the menorahs could be vandalized or destroyed, and then have nitwits like them call that free speech. One of the things I will get into it, like I said in the second of the show about the Ivy Leagues, this is not a new development. They have been anti-Semitic since their founding. And so we'll be talking about that as well. But the point is that people that saw this were repulsed, not just by the obtuse nature of these Harvard and MIT and Penn presidents. They were just appalled by their arrogance that, we're going to have to be context derived. What's going to be context specific? And you're too stupid, Ms. Stefanik, to know the difference. And so is the American people. You know, we are educated. We are the elite. We know what's going on, and you people are just reacting to what you see on Fox News or whatever they want to think. Again, I ask my faithful listening audience, what other group could Harvard students run through their campus saying eliminate them and get away with it, other than the Jews? And it makes me sick. But there, I'm letting my own emotions get ahead of it. The responses, though, came pretty hot and heavy. Taylor, we have a couple of clips that show the reaction that a lot of people had, including their universities. Hang on just a minute on the clip. A lot of the donors, particularly at Penn, said, this is not what we support. One donor had a $100 million donation that he pulled from Penn because he was appalled by what he probably finally saw for himself for the first time. And many other donors, Jewish and non-Jewish, were appalled that their universities that they spend all this time and money on would support this kind of rhetoric. Now, they all talk about free speech. Let's say that this Harvard protest was going through the downtown Boston. Would that be different? Not for me, but it might be legally. But this is not. But at a college campus, which is an environment in which students supposedly of all walks of life are supposed to attend. That's a different context altogether. But a lot of people around the country were just appalled at the arrogance and the obtuseness of these college presidents. So run the first clip, if you will, Taylor.
Back here at home, the presidents of Harvard, MIT, and the University of Pennsylvania are under fire for their responses on how to handle calls for Jewish genocide on campus. Well, tonight, second gentleman Doug Emhoff, who is the first Jewish spouse of an American president or vice president, speaking at the National Menorah lighting, just said, quote, "The lack of moral clarity is simply unacceptable." CBS's Nicole Killian reports the backlash is also coming from school donors and elected officials.
Tonight, the presidents of Harvard, University of Pennsylvania, and MIT facing a tough grade after this question was posed to them at a House education hearing this week on anti-Semitism.
Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate MIT's code of conduct or rules regarding bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
If targeted at individuals, not making public statements.
Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's rules or code of conduct?
If the speech turns into conduct, it can be harassment. Yes, it is a context-dependent decision, Congresswoman.
It's a context-dependent decision. That's your testimony today. Calling for the genocide of Jews is depending upon the context. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
It can be, depending on the context.
It does not depend on the context. The answer is yes, and this is why you should resign. These are unacceptable answers across the board.
Today, New York Republican Elise Stefanik announced a congressional investigation with subpoena power into the universities, which are facing widespread condemnation. Business leaders like Pfizer's CEO called it one of the most despicable moments in the history of U.S. academia. Hedge fund manager Bill Ackman said they must all resign in disgrace.
I want to be clear. A call for genocide of Jewish people is threatening, deeply so.
Despite Penn's president trying to clarify, the university's board of trustees met today on short notice, and the state's governor called her testimony failed leadership.
I thought her comments were absolutely shameful.
Jonathan Greenblatt is CEO of the Anti-Defamation League.
There are some who've tried to hide behind arguments that it's a matter of free speech. But I'm sorry, freedom of speech is not the freedom to slander people because of their ethnicity.
A University of Pennsylvania official tells CBS News there is no board plan for an imminent change in leadership. But according to a source close to the Penn trustees, there are likely to be conversations with the board and Penn President McGill about her future in the coming days. Nora?
Nicole Killian with all that new information. Thank you very much.
And as we know now, Ms. McGill, Dr. McGill, was terminated, or she resigned, along with the chair of the Regents, Board of Regents, who supported her. That decision came only a couple hours, actually, after that news broadcast. So when she was telling you that, no decision's been made, yeah, it was already made. They just hadn't announced it yet. Try the NBC clip, if you would, Taylor.
Tonight, the pressure is growing on the presidents of the elite universities of Harvard and MIT to resign. This weekend, the president of the University of Pennsylvania, Liz McGill, stepping down after critics blasted her testimony before Congress about anti-Semitism on campus. Harvard's president, Claudine Gay, also being criticized for this response.
Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
It can be, depending on the context.
Does not depend on the context. The answer is yes, and this is why you should resign.
That Congresswoman, Republican Elise Stefanik, tweeted after the resignation at UPenn, 1 down, 2 to go, referencing the leaders at Harvard and MIT. Harvard's president did later apologize, writing in part on X, "Let me be clear, calls for violence or genocide against the Jewish community or any religious or ethnic group are vile. They have no place at Harvard, and those who threaten our Jewish students will be held to account." But that hasn't quieted her critics, including the billionaire alumnus Bill Ackman, who is actively pushing for her resignation. Jonathan Greenblatt is CEO of the Anti-Defamation League. Is ADL calling for these leaders to resign?
I think ADL is saying we want action. And if the presidents prepare clear and well-developed plans to their boards, demonstrate how they are prepared to take real, immediate steps, I think that might allay many of the concerns.
Universities across the country have faced mounting criticism over their response to the war. Some Jewish and Muslim students say too little is being done to protect them.
It's important for people to understand that we're all in it together, and everyone is hurt and everyone feels, quite disturbed by, this situation.
Dana Griffin, NBC News.
Thanks for watching.
Okay, so he saw the resignation of the Penn president. The Harvard president gave some mealy-mouthed apology and said that she was just wanted to have a chance to, quote, speak her truth, and whatever that means. Today, it's reported that Dr. Gay at Harvard will be retained. And I'll have some comments about that as well, but she's not going to be let go. And I'm sure they'll go through some sort of hair pulling and carrying on about a new policy here and a new policy there and all this other stuff. But the rot goes a lot deeper than just this one event and this one testimony. And again, I'm trying to be organized in how I approach this, so I'll get to that in a minute. But that the rot was exposed, I think, for a lot of people last week about what actually is being taught on these campuses, what kind of atmosphere is allowed to exist on these campuses, the moral cowardice of most university, or at least these university presidents. I don't want to lump them all in at the same category. And I think a lot of people were given visual evidence of what they've always thought about these Ivy League schools. What about the Democrats on the left on the party? The majority of Democrats in the House are supportive of Israel. So I'm not going to lump them in and say the Democrat Party does this. That's not true, because Joe Biden has been supportive of Israel. Sometimes I think he gets a little bit shaky in his comments about the both sidesism kind of thing. But I do believe that he's more or less on the side of Israel and the right to exist and the right for self-defense. And a majority of Democrats, I think, in the Congress are as well, but not these. These are the infamous squad members. So let's just run through a few photos of them. This lady here is a congresswoman from the Seattle area, Pramila Prayapal, part of the Democrat Socialist of America Party, like so many of these squad members are. And her comments are just atrocious because she's focusing strictly on what's going on in Gaza, not what happened on October 7th, but she's focusing on the destruction of what's going on in Gaza and the deaths, which, I'll comment on that in a minute too. But the point is that she is a member of the United States Congress, and she's basically saying, among others, that Israel does not have the right to self-defense. Israel is our best and oldest ally in the Middle East. It's the only democracy in the Middle East. And am I saying they're perfect? Israel is in no way perfect. They have flaws in how they govern, and they have things I wish they could do better, particularly on the West Bank, which is something we're not talking much about these days. But her comments can be nothing more than anti-Semitism, period. It's not anti-Zionist or anti-Israel. She's not being critical of Israeli policy. She's critical of Israelis' right to exist. All right, here, what's another one we got coming up here? Our friend Rashida Tlaib, she's from Detroit. She is Palestinian birth. And she calls Joe Genocide Joe, which I think is unfair, but that's his problem. But Rashida Tlaib is basically calling for the destruction of the Israeli state. She endorses from the river to the sea comments. She has excused some of the excesses of the protests that have gone on against, and see, this is my point. It's not a protest against Israel. These protests are against Jews. That's a different thing entirely. They're protesting the Jewish nation. They're not focusing on the Israeli government. We've got menorahs being damaged all over this country. We have synagogues being vandalized. We have the protests that I laid out for you. And they're directed at Jewish people, at the Jews, not at the government of Israel. And so Rashida Tlaib is an elected member of Congress, and she basically is tacitly endorsing genocide, even though she will scream and holler that, oh, no, both sides are terrible. Blah. No, they're not. We've already read your comments. She's been supportive of Hamas since her election. And then there's this whole group here, the squad, if you will. Of course, there's our friend AOC. Over her shoulder is Jamal Bowman of New York. You have Cori Bush at the top from St. Louis. The bald African-American lady is Ayanna Pressley from Boston. Ilhan Omar with the headgear is she's from Minneapolis. And then there's Tlaib from Detroit. These people, when they were presented with a resolution in the House 2 weeks ago, affirming the right of Israel to exist and for self-defense, Bush and Tlaib voted no. Omar and AOC voted present, and Presley and Bowman weren't even present for the vote. They just skipped it. And so, here we have members of our own U.S. Congress that are taking the side of genocide and what went on October 7th and its legitimate actions. And it's not just them. It's a lot of these liberal groups as well. I'm going to point out one in particular, the Council for American Islamic Relations. Where's this quote? Here it is. This guy's name is Nihad Awad. I'll try it again. I had the mic out of my face. This is Nihad Awad. He's from the Council of American Islamic Relations. Do we have that picture, Taylor? There he is. Basically, CARE, as it's called, is probably the most prominent of the lobby groups that focus on American and Islamic relations, or American Islam, or Muslims and American whatever else. Here his quote is. This is from, quoted in the National Review, "The people of Gaza only decided to break the siege, the walls of the concentration camp, on October 7th. And yes, I was happy to see people breaking the siege and throwing down the shackles of their own land and walk free into their land, which they were not allowed to walk in." They weren't just breaking down the wall and taking a stroll. They were brutally massacring Israeli citizens and then some American citizens as well. This is not some kind of protest. This was a horrific genocide of men and women and children in most grotesque fashions. And he's acting like it's just an expression of freedom on their part. 1,200 Israelis and Americans were killed in very brutal fashion. We still have 137 hostages being held in Hamas. Why are they still being held? For one thing, the men, they all think every Israeli is going to pick up a rifle, which I don't blame them for doing so now. But also there's several women among them, and many of which have probably been brutally assaulted and raped. And there were examples of rape and mutilation and torture and violence against Israeli women. And we're not talking about just testimony. We have video clips. Israel has been showing the world press and private screenings what they have collected, not just from their own video, but from video that they have obtained from Hamas fighters or intercepted on the internet, of them gloating and massacring people. The world press has agreed not to show these, not because they want to protect Hamas, but because they say they're so graphic and they're so brutal that they even go beyond the boundaries of any kind of necessity to see them. But I remember reading, a couple of authors from the Atlantic that saw it, and a couple of authors from the Washington Post that saw it. And they were nauseated, disgusted, horrified at the brutality that Hamas showed these Israeli people. And this guy says, yes, I was happy to see people breaking the siege and throwing down the shackles of their own land and walk free into their land, which they're not allowed to walk in. And I'll continue his quote, as he's saying, to applause at the gathering of American Muslims for Palestine. And yes, the people of Gaza have the right to self-defense, have the right to defend themselves. And yes, Israel, as an occupying power, does not have that right to self-defense. So, there you go. He said it better than I could, basically. So the point is that on this topic, there is no moderation on the far left. Israel does not have the right to exist, and the Israeli people deserve what they got. And this is another thing that drives me crazy as well, is where are the feminist groups? The feminist groups go over the chart about assault on women, yet when it comes to the assault on the Israeli women, nothing, not a word. And you get nitwits like Whoopi Goldberg defending that silence. I don't know. Taylor, you ever watch that show, The View?
Not particularly, no.
No. I see the clips every now and then because they're so egregious in their comments that somebody posts them every now and then. And they're defending the silence of these feminist groups. You know, they go nuts about all these other issues, but when it comes to Israeli women and children, nothing. That's why I have very little regard for feminist groups, not because I'm an anti-feminist or any of this bullcorn. It just, they are selective in their outrage. They get all worked up about certain topics and certain people, but when it comes to Israeli women who are brutally, horrifically raped and massacred, nothing. And that's why so many people have such a dim view of these kind of liberal activist groups, because they are, again, selective in what they get worked up about and what they will protest about. Now, I'm going to run to the second round of commercials. We're going to talk about some of the after effects. I also talk about the universities themselves. I'm going to change topics, but you know, it's interesting. Southern Gem, one of their main suppliers, is from Israel. Israel is the main supplier of diamonds. And so Gayla has been very, very attuned to what's going on over there. And I know I can vouch for her saying right now, pray for Israel. She would ask that very much so. Because, again, she deals with Israeli jewel dealers quite often. And the stories they have told her are not pleasant. Now, they may not be graphic, but they all have family there. They're under threat. There you are. But anyway, it is Christmas time, and they are very busy. They're going to be open an hour later every day, plus about 6 hours on Saturday, this Saturday and the next. So don't wait to the last minute. You know, I was there Friday night. They had a little open house, kind of like a anniversary, 2-year or 1-year anniversary of their new spot. And I saw several friends there, and they got great inventory and very helpful staff, including the lovely Mrs. Allard. So there you are. Southern Gem over at the Standard, right beside American Revelry. Also, thank you to Old Pro Roofing, John Williams at 817-734-2756. Give him a call. He'll check your roof out. He'll tell you the truth about the roof. He won't try to upsell you. He won't try to make you feel like your roof's about to fall in, unless it is. So give John a call. Old Pro for local folks, or there's offices in downtown, Old Town, Burleson. So there you go. You're dealing with local folks, run and operated by local folks. Also, speaking of local folks, we have Camco. Camco is the latest mortgage company from Sammy Campbell and Candy Gow. They've been doing mortgage business here in Burleson for at least 20 years. I've used them twice myself in other places they've been. But now they have their own place. And so call Sammy at 817-778-4592 or Candy at 817-925-2661. I could vouch personally, they do a great job. And they'll get you what you need. As low a mortgage as possible, refinance if you need it, things of that nature. Also, Taylor, we still have there we go. He's so quick. We're promoting this on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce and the City of Burleson, the Burleson PD in particular, about these posters that you may be seeing all over the place in Burleson, particularly in the women's restrooms. This is a means by which, if you're suffering from some sort of abuse, you have a means of making that known and getting some help. yet the QR code will take you directly to a link, and you can fill out the form. Will the police become involved? If you want them to, and if you report that you're getting sexually or physically assaulted, yes, that's why it's there, so they can intervene in this situation. But let's say it's just you don't know where to go for other types of assistance, not necessarily physical violence against you, but you're living out of your car, or you're not sure about where to go to get a temporary handout of groceries. Well, handout's the wrong word, a gift of groceries from these nonprofits. They'll help you with that as well. Stephanie Beard, Colin Gregory were on the show a week ago Monday, and so check out that particular episode if you want more details. It's one of the best things we've done, and you'll see these all over the women's stalls, and you might see a couple in the men's stalls, because it's not unknown at all for men to also be in an abusive relationship or in need of services of some kind. So you're going to see all these posters cost $7 a piece to help defray the cost. And we've had several businesses already, Our Place, Walmart, I believe Texas Bar, have all bought some of these. So, if you want to have that in your place of business, call or contact Colin or Stephanie over at Burleson PD, and they'll get you sit right up. Okay, back to my discussion here. The repercussions of this have started. Many donors are pulling out or suspending their donations to these schools. Like we mentioned, Penn has already let go of their president and their head of the Board of Regents. As far as MIT, I haven't heard anything, but as far as also Claudine Gay at Harvard, what's her repercussion besides an embarrassing testimony and a more embarrassing apology? Actually, people started looking at her scholarship record and whatever else and found out she has plagiarized quite a bit of her doctoral work and as a tenured professor at Harvard. Today in the Washington Beacon, there's a big article that compares many of her writings with some of her, what they consider to be plagiarism. And they gave examples of these to other professors, like at other universities of similar stature, and they said without question it's plagiarism. They didn't even mince their words. Now, some were more angry about it than others, but they even contacted the people that she plagiarized against. Here is, for example, in this article, I'm reading not just the Washington Free Beacon, but also the National Review's report of it. The quality of Gay's academic work has also been recently challenged. Gay had paraphrased or quoted nearly 20 authors, including 2 of her Harvard University colleagues, without proper attribution in 4 of her publications, including her doctoral dissertation, the Washington Free Beacon reported Monday. In at least 10 instances, Gays used full sentences and entire paragraph without minor alterations, or with minor alterations, rather. Something I saw in high school, okay? And here's the thing about Gay's academic background. It's very, very slight for somebody that's going to be the president of a major university. To become a major professor, a tenured professor at a university like this, you could have a very extensive publication background and research background. She has neither. She only has about 10 articles published as either a doctoral student or as a professor. That's amazingly low. The fact that she became president of this university in one of the shortest search periods Harvard ever had for an opening in that position, I'll leave it to you to make your own conclusions. My personal opinion is they were more interested in the optics than they were in the quality of her leadership or her scholarship. I think they were trying to make a statement. And that's unfortunate for Harvard because they've now produced this kind of poor leadership. Here, according to the review, maybe we should start out. A few conservative commentators mused idly about how someone so utterly incompetent had been promoted to the face of America's most prestigious academic institution, a question that became even more curious when it was pointed out that Gay, unlike any previous president of Harvard, had produced almost zero actual scholarship, a mere 10 pieces in boutique academic journals since acquiring her PhD from Harvard in 1998. No monographs or extended scholarly works to her name, and nothing whatsoever since 2016. Look, getting published as a professor isn't the trick you might think it is. They're not being published in the Wall Street Journal or mass media publications. They're being published in when they call it these boutique journals. They're talking about with a readership of less than 1,000. Very specialized journals, the kind of stuff I had to read in graduate school. The stuff that nobody outside of a very, very minute population would have even the least interest in. So getting published is not the trick that it makes it sound like. She's only done it 10 times, by far the least of any Harvard president. Again, I think they hired her because of the optics, because she would present a diverse and a different kind of face of Harvard as opposed to some stuffy old white man. Now, I don't want to get into racial stuff at all because that's not my point. It's not, because there's a lot of great Black and Hispanic and Asian scholars out there, many of them. But I also know that Harvard prides itself on being on the cutting edge of diversity, and this had to be part of that thinking, to hire somebody with such a scant background in scholarship. Now, as far as the comments on the universities themselves, my experience in the universities as a student and as a teacher is not really like that. I got my master's degree in political science from UTA. I graduated in 1994. And I had professors that were very, very liberal, but they didn't treat me poorly. I had a good experience at UTA. I mean, they would agree or disagree, and we all did it in an appropriate way. I had one professor, I taught at UTA for 3 years at night as an adjunct in the mid to late 90s. And the woman who got me the job was a Marxist, by her own definition, not me calling her one, but she said, I am a Marxist, a French woman. And when I took her graduate classes, oh boy, she ripped me up and down for my opinions, but she never abused me, all right? And like I said, when the time came, she was my sponsor to getting a job there. As far as other academic situations, as an adjunct there, as Hill College, I don't think this is not really an issue at all. At Dallas Baptist, same thing. Most of your universities may have professors that are liberal and whatever else, but the majority of students are like, is this on the test? If it ain't, then don't bother with it. All right, they're not. This is not a universal condition in all universities. UTA isn't like Harvard like that. Most Texas A&M may have some liberal professors, but as a whole, they're not going to allow this kind of abuse. Or UT may be a little bit more liberal, but I haven't seen anything from them about this. Most of the universities, the majority of universities, are not infected by this to that degree. Now, some of all the universities have to toe the line on certain things with Title IX, whatever else. But the point is that I don't want to paint with too broad a brush and say our entire university system is corrupt and rotten to the core. That's not true. But I do think the Ivy Leagues and the Ivy adjacents are. When I say Ivy adjacent, I'm talking like Duke, Stanford, Northwestern, University of Chicago, those that have Ivy League credentials, even if they're not part of the original 10 Ivy League schools. There, I think, is a problem because they have so insulated themselves from reality, and they're so cognizant of their elite status and their tenured status that they basically can say whatever they want, and they're not going to be running afoul of anybody in their their jobs are not going to be in jeopardy. I support tenure to a point because you don't want people in the state legislatures going after the universities just because they don't like, the liberalism that they may see in those universities. So, yeah, tenure may not be the evil thing that one thinks it is. But you got to these Ivy League universities, they're highly overrated, for one thing. The majority of those students are there for other reasons besides their great academic standing. And these are the students, for the most part, that have all the advantages of any student ever need, including a parent that probably donates to the university or a legacy admission or whatever else. And they're producing idiots. This is what Bill Maher said. He said these major universities, these elite universities, are producing idiots. Of course, he had a few more expletives to go with it, but they don't really even know what they're protesting. You have that clip about these are British students and whatnot, but they don't even know what they're protesting about. You want to run that clip?
Hamas invaded Israel on the 7th of October. What was your initial reaction to that?
I don't believe they did they? Hamas? I think so. Honestly, I think I need to be a bit more clued up on everything that's going on. So I feel like I'm not really qualified to answer that too well. I mean, I'm not sure if I've seen anything that shows that that's actually happened or actually correct.
What can you say about that? They don't even believe that it happened. They're out there protesting anyway. Here's a quote from a professor at Cal Berkeley, of all places, from the Wall Street Journal, Professor named Ron Hassner, professor of political science. He will quote this: "When college students who sympathize with Palestinian chant from the river to the sea do not know what they are talking about, I hired a survey firm to poll 250 students from a variety of backgrounds across the U.S. Most said they supported the chant, some enthusiastically, 38.2%, and others to a lesser extent, 53.2%. So we're talking nearly what? I'm doing my math on the fly. Nearly 85% support this Palestine chant about getting rid of Jews in Israel. But only 47% of the students who embraced the slogan were able to name the river and the sea. Some of the alternative answers were the Nile and the Euphrates, the Caribbean, the Dead Sea, which isn't even a sea, and the Atlantic. Less than a quarter of these students know who Yasser Arafat was. 12 of them, in fact, said he was the first prime minister of Israel. Asked in what decade Israelis and Palestinians had signed the Oslo Accords, which was in 1994, more than a quarter of the chant supporters claimed that no such peace agreements had ever been signed. There's a Nobel Prize being shared by the two signers, Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin, and there's a picture of Bill Clinton, embracing them both. It's a very famous picture. There's no shame in being ignorant unless one is screaming for the extermination of millions. So basically, these people don't even know what they're arguing about. They just get out there and start chanting death to the Jews because that's what you do at some of these Ivy League schools. Here's another quote. This is from a New York Times a reporter named Nick Confessori, whom I've read before. For years, conservatives have struggled to persuade American voters that the left-wing tilt of higher education is not only wrong but dangerous. Universities and their students, they've argued, have been increasingly clinched by suffocating ideologies. Political correctness in one decade, overweening social justice in another, wokeism most recently, that shouldn't be dismissed as academic frauds or harmless zeal. The validation they have sought seemed to finally arrive this fall as campus is convulsed with protests against Israel's military campaign in Gaza and hostile, sometimes violent, rhetoric towards Jews. It came to a head last week on Capitol Hill as the presidents of the three elite universities struggled to answer a question about whether calling for the genocide of Jews would violate school rules. And Republicans asserted that outbreaks of campus anti-Semitism were a symptom of the radical ideas they had long warned about. I agree. There's not academic standards. There's not academic rigor in the Ivy Leagues. They're not teaching students to think. They're teaching students how to feel and how to react. They're not teaching students to analyze. They're teaching generations of activists, and it's self-perpetuating. You might say, what do I care about Harvard or Yale or Princeton or any of these other institutions? What do they got to do with me? It is a self-perpetuating aristocracy. The elites of politics, the elites of academic stature, the elites of opinion makers in journalism, the elites of business come from a very, very small segment of our universities. You don't have a lot of journalists in the New York Times or Wall Street Journal, well, not Wall Street Journal, Washington Post or other places. You don't have them coming from, TCU School of Journalism, the Schieffer School of Journalism, which is very good, or the Baylor Journalism School or the SMU School. No, you don't get that. They're all from the Northeast, from these elite colleges and universities. It's a self-perpetuating aristocracy. That's why, even though we don't probably even know anybody that goes to these schools or ever deal with anybody that goes to these schools, we should be concerned because it's this small, tiny segment of self-appointed elites that perpetuate itself or perpetuate these attitudes. Okay? It's this group that continues to promote amongst themselves, to support each other academically, financially, etc. And they're the ones that drive the culture, so to speak. That's why it's such a concern. And you don't have to be a right-wing follower of Hannity or Mark Levin or anybody like that to be concerned about that. Speaking of which, my cousin pointed out an article that was the author's on Levin. His name was John Ellis in the Wall Street Journal. He had some comments about it as well. So if you have access to the Wall Street Journal, you got to check it out. It's on December 4th, and he talks about this very thing. Now, I'm going to end it with this. You don't have to excuse or apologize or make excuses for everything the nation of Israel or the government of Israel does to be supportive of Israel. Okay? Not everything Israel's done has been smart or good. The way they've handled, like, the West Bank situation, there is criticism can be deserved. And that criticism is not un-American or violent. But what you're seeing now is in criticism, it's a call for genocide. It's a call for the destruction of the Israeli nation and the people that consist of it. And it's not going to stop just with Israeli Jews. It's happening here to American Jews. Our American Jewish friends and colleagues and countrymen are under threat by people that are so far to the left that they can't even see the other side, even remotely. People say, well, if you don't, well, let me rephrase, I'm kind of stumbling over my words, I'll say it better. Again, it's one thing to criticize Israel about maybe how it's conducting itself in certain situations, not just with this one and others, but in no way should we condone or allow Hamas to go and rape and kill and pillage like they did and expect Israel just to take it and be beholden to the world opinion. And in no way did anything Hamas did is justifiable in any sense of the word, and anybody that supports that is as craven as they are. And I'll say that again. It's not, if you want to be concerned about the Palestinians in Gaza, the innocent ones that are caught in between, hey, I understand. I get it. It's tragic. You see this stuff going on, and you see children and whatnot being caught in the middle of all this. But that's not the same thing as calling for the destruction of the Israeli nation or Jewish nation itself. There's no way to support that and justify that, not just within the constitutional context, but in a humanitarian context. So do I stand with Israel? Yes. Do I give it an unequivocal blank check? No, and neither should you. But what I'm saying is this has gone well beyond that, and our universities have fostered this attitude. The universities, the Ivy League universities we're talking about, were much more hostile to Jews entering their schools than they were black and Asian students initially. Harvard let black students in before they let Jewish students in back in the 19th century. And again, if you think this is something that's just isolated to those schools, it's not, because these are the people that dominate the higher ground, as they say, on public opinion, on politics, on economics, academics. So what can you do about it? Who knows? You don't pray, but that's about it in many cases. But support our Jewish friends, particularly in this time of Hanukkah. But support our Jewish Americans in any case, that they be protected from this kind of hostility, hatred, and violence. Because when they said this is not what America is about, this is definitely not what America is about. Okay. On Thursday, I'm going to be doing another solo show. I'm going to be talking about Hunter Biden. Is this just something that Fox News gets worked up about, or is it serious or not? And also just about the 2024 election as a whole. Monday, I have Victoria coming in. We're going to talk about last night's city council meeting. Apparently, there was some discussion about property in Old Town, and we'll be talking about that. Tuesday, I have Next Step Women's Center with Megan and probably Summer, I assume both. And then a week from Thursday, I have our friend Jennifer Wood from Harvest House. So we have a big week next week. And I appreciate you letting me get this off my chest. And I hope you share this with friends, and I'll see y'all later.